I want to speak a little bit more about this morning's Parsha before we head towards the end of services. And I specifically want to reflect a little bit more on this, the phrase that we take into our Passover Seder and our Haggadah. This verse, I'll read it in Hebrew first and then in English. And like I said, I expect it's familiar to everyone. It is chapter 26. It begins in verse 5. Arami oved avi, vayered mitzrayma, vayegar sham nimtei ma'at, vayisham legoy gadol atzum verav. And the Eitz Chaim, our Chumash, translates it as the following. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager number and sojourned there, but he became a great and very populous, but there he became a great and very populous nation. And that is the beginning of the most famous set of verses from this morning's Parsha. And when we read them this morning, they're not famous because we're left in awe by their deep meaning or their striking resonance into our lives, but because verbatim, they become such an important part of the Passover Seder. Their original context, as part of this first fruits ceremony, was once upon a time much more striking. The first fruits ceremony is an important ritual of acknowledgement and gratitude. I will tell you from experience, there is nothing more exciting than finding the first ripe, whatever it may be, cherry, tomato, strawberry, red pepper, apple, peach, I mean, you name it. This is one of the joys of living in New England, right? We don't have fresh and delicious and bright things necessarily 12 months a year, but when we have them, they are awesome. And especially, I mean, what comes to mind certainly for me more than anything else is probably strawberries. Strawberries, as we know, around here come ripe usually in kind of mid-June or so. And if you have a big field of strawberries and by the time the second week of June rolls around, you're out there every day looking for that little, spot of red in this sea of green. And the minute you find it, you get really excited. And so if you can picture yourself out in a big field of strawberries, and again, this sea of green, the berries are green, the leaves are green, you see this spot of bright red, and you see that it's this perfectly delicious, perfectly ripe strawberry. And you haven't had a strawberry. Imagine you're not buying strawberries in from California or from Mexico, but you haven't had a strawberry since last July. Your first inclination is usually to run over to that spot of red, pop it off the plant, and throw it straight into your mouth. Whether you savor it, whether you slurp it, whatever, that part is all up to you. And usually, if there's one ripe one, if you look hard enough, there's generally more than one ripe one. You can usually find at least a handful. And so after you found that one ripe one, you walk up and down the entire patch until you find that handful. And then it's up to you what you do with them. You can either kind of go into a dark corner and eat that entire handful by yourself, or you can share them. You can share them with a coworker, you can share them with a boss, you can share them with a loved one. And sometimes that all happens to be the same person, as is my case working on Mac's farm sometimes, although she's never grown strawberries. And in sharing them, you can really start to not just share that beautiful fruit and that beautiful flavor, but also really to share joy and excitement. And that an experience as kind of magical and engaging as this, that it deserves a blessing is no surprise. It's a moment ripe for recognition and appreciation. And that's actually what this set of verses encourages us to do, right? We read on to verse 10, which really wants us to be sharing this bounty and this joy and these feelings of newness. And verse 10 into 11 reads, you're bringing this first fruit in a basket. It's kind of like an old school, you're going out to a picnic, and you can just imagine kind of skipping up to the promised land with all your happiness and all your excitement in your little picnic basket. You shall leave the basket before the Lord your God, and you shall enjoy together with the Levite and the stranger in your midst all the bounty that the Lord your God has bestowed upon you and your household. This moment of appreciation can actually, what started as potentially a very solitary moment, that moment of you finding the one ripe fruit in the field, can actually turn into a really deep moment of togetherness and of sharing and of inclusion. This isn't something that you're just bringing to be offered to God. It's not something that you're bringing to be lit upon an altar and not to be enjoyed by anything but the divine, but something that you share with your family and with kind of the highest echelons of society and the priesthood, but also some of the commonly overlooked echelons of society, the strangers in your midst, the people who might sometimes get pushed to the fringe, but in this moment of celebration and of sharing, we really bring them into the center to enjoy this celebration with us. And it really is, it's not, the first fruit ceremony is not something we can necessarily all relate to in our common, in our avenues of work these days, although I'm sure you can argue that even today in some ways feels like a first fruits ceremony, having the, being up in the sanctuary and having everything hooked up and being really excited to share that with you. I feel like we're doing that in some ways. And I think kind of regardless of wherever we put our creative energies and our work energies, I hope that we can, not just the farmers amongst us, but I hope that we can all kind of find that enthusiasm and that way to share and that way to bring it to the people around us.